Hillsborough Street Community Service Corporation is thrilled to present the History of Hillsborough Street documentary. Immerse yourself in this compelling narrative as we unveil a rich tapestry of images and facts that chronicle the evolution of Hillsborough Street. Experience the journey through insightful voiceovers featuring perspectives from key figures such as Nina Landis, Ralph Ritchie, Kevin Jennings, and Daniel Howe, individuals instrumental in the corporation's early days. The historical documentary will vividly portray the street's prominent past, while the voiceovers will provide highlighting insights into the inception of our esteemed Hillsborough Street Community Service Corporation.
The surveyor who laid out the city of Raleigh, his name was William Christmas. And this used to all be dirt. Where the university was a pasture. The main streets leading out of Raleigh led to the destinations: Hillsboro, Newbern, Halifax, and Wilmington. So that's where Hillsborough Street got its name, because it was the road from Raleigh, which meant down there, that was Raleigh, like a few square miles, going to Hillsboro, like on a wagon.
Hillsborough Street was 4 lanes with a turn lane, so 5 lanes in most blocks. No parking on the university side of the street. So even the curb lane right next to this narrow sidewalk was 35 miles per hour. And like dump trucks and stuff were racing through there at 35, 40 miles an hour, inches from the students.
Yeah.
It was very inhospitable to cross the street. The condition of the road was pretty poor. Where Primrose Hall is, there's a little gateway there where Enterprise dead ends into the campus. That used to be a through street. So there was through traffic right onto campus at that point. Poland was a T-cross intersection with a traffic light where the roundabout is. So those 2 lights really jammed things up and would cause long delays and cause traffic to back up in every direction, right? Up Enterprise, down Hillsborough Street, down Poland. Oberlin connection was over near Players Retreat. There was no leg that goes to the roundabout now. That didn't exist. So you had this series of dog legs in order to get through campus, all controlled by traffic lights. So lots of standing traffic, lots of speeding traffic when it was, it was a rush hour path in and out of downtown. And I bring up the road because the road was so bad that what happened is it made it difficult for students to comfortably cross the street. So they really looked for reasons not to cross the street. And that caused the businesses to suffer because obviously they're mostly student-oriented businesses and even were more so then. The other thing is because they're so student-oriented, they were really only making money 9 months out of the year anyway. The place was dead in the summer. You could fire a cannon off on the sidewalk and nobody was around. Everything used to be centered in North Campus. So all of our athletic activities, all the academics, all of the research, all of the library activities, everything that the residential core was just south of it. So that's where the concentration of students and faculty were for most of the history of the school. Then came the 80s and we started to decentralize a little bit, right? We moved athletics out to PNC and to Finley Stadium, and we started the research campus at on Centennial Campus, which moved a lot of engineering and a lot of research, and textiles moved out there. In fact, I think textiles was the first thing to move out there. So all of a sudden we're decentralizing campus because we're growing, we're expanding. It wasn't an effort to kill Hillsborough Street, but that's what the net effect was. So you took all these students and faculty and you spread them all out. you got it to the point where the campus was so big you needed a car or the bus to get places, and it wasn't anymore this concentration of walkable neighborhoods campus with all of these amenities on Hillsborough Street. So that also contributed to the downfall, I think, or the decline. The city, through the Hillsborough Street Partnership, had already started developing a plan to put in those roundabouts. In fact, there was a more robust plan for even additional ones, but they started with phase one, which was essentially from Oberlin to Gardner, I think it was. So that was in the works as far as funding and design, but it was not done yet. So
we held the charrette in 1999. Yep. So that was when we got all the money. We hired Dan and put the plan together for having the community charrette. We met at tables with maps, and community members, like 10 people at a table, got to look at the maps and draw and problems, solutions, what works, what doesn't work. All done with a little bit of education about what other communities did, pictures of before and afters around the United States and other places. So there was some educational aspect to it, and then this community input. We put people in wheelchairs, and we went up and down the street to look at, so that people who were not handicapped could experience what it felt like to be handicapped on Hillsborough Street. Because at that time, most of this was not ramped. It was totally inaccessible. Very hard for a person in a wheelchair to traverse. So, and we also had people, as I said, who were blind, come and show us, what the problem spots were. So we did that. We had a community fair where we had people in the neighborhood like play in a band, and just for more of a kind of a community building exercise. So there was a lot of different aspects. And then once all that was done, we had this group of volunteer and semi-professional designers work. So the transportation planners like Ed Johnson, the architects like Mike Harwood, and Sally Ricks, who was the landscape architect over there, Russ Stevenson, who lives around the corner as an architect, became a city councilor after he did that charrette, and was a city councilor for like 12 years. He kind of launched his political career. We had a team of like 10 or 12 people, and they helped at that time. That's not here anymore. Wait a minute, is it? Where were we? Yeah, there was this old building here. This has since been torn down, and this is now in its place. But they were up in the top floor, and they just, worked for like 24 hours, putting together a plan for Hillsborough Street.
Everybody realized that this ad hoc neighborhood planning group was not going to run the show here, that we needed staff, and the city was growing like leaps and bounds, and so Hillsborough Street was one little piece of a much bigger challenge that the city council had. So they weren't going to dedicate resources to running the show on Hillsborough Street. The university wasn't going to dedicate resources because they had their own problems, and so it became clear that if we were going to continue the momentum that got established back in the 80s, it started in the 80s, that you really had to have professional staff, and the only way to have a professional staff is to have a dedicated funding source and to have an organization set up, and that's where the model using the downtown advocacy groups emerged, and eventually got approved by everybody.
The city was going to make the investment in the street. I said I thought one of the things to do would be to not only formalize what this partnership, Hillsborough Street Partners were, kind of formalize it into a real organization, not just an ad hoc neighborhood group that got together. They were very good. They did a lot. They were the ones who really powered the whole street investment to begin with. So it's not like they didn't do anything. They got a lot done. But we had to formalize them, and they weren't funded. So I had experience from Ohio in forming 2 different municipal service districts, or what they called in Ohio business improvement districts. So I said, I think that might be a mechanism that we can use here. We can create this organization. It would have tax funding. The more successful they are, the more the value of the property increases, which increases the tax collection, which increases their budget. So when the organization was approved, the Hillsborough Street Partners hired Nina Schlossberg and Roger Henderson, who were on the partnership board to kind of initially run the organization, just to get the charter in place, get their 501c3 status, get office space, and then go about the mission of advertising to hire an executive director. So we kind of had somebody temporarily in place as just consultants for a year while we did all this stuff, because there was just a lot of housekeeping. Somebody had to figure out how to get the phone number. I mean, it was like some, again, this was the moving the partnership into actually being a business. And we suddenly had this budget, so we'd had to open accounts and hire a bookkeeper. The city was now ready to break ground on the street project. So this timing was really good. We were kind of unfolding the bid and what the services might be. At the same time, they suddenly had a job, and that job was going to be the liaison between the city's construction arm, this road project, and the merchants, to try to help everything go smoothly. And they had a big groundbreaking. It was a nice event. The roundabouts and the new brick sidewalks and everything else were all part of that project. While they had the street dug up, though, that was the time to also look at the utilities underneath it. So we also did water lines and sewer lines and everything else. And one of the things they uncovered when they pulled back the pavement were the original streetcar lines that the rails ran down the center of the street from when they used to have a streetcar running from downtown out to what was the State Fairgrounds, which was now the Little Raleigh Theater area. The first phase project was completed. It wasn't without pain, too. It was because it was water lines and stuff. It meant each one of the hookups to each business had to be redone. The sidewalks were torn up right at the business doors. There was a trench with water line right at the door. It had its moments. Some of the sewer lines were very deep. There's one that runs down Enterprise, cuts across Hillsborough Street, goes behind Primrose through the Court of North Carolina. Now, when you're standing on Hillsborough Street, you're looking down the hill at the Court of North Carolina. So you can imagine how deep that sewer line was under Hillsborough Street to be underground when it reaches the backyard of Primrose. Yeah. So that hole on Hillsborough Street must have been 30 feet deep. It was a cavern. So it was a problem. There was a lot of vibration because of all the jackhammering and stuff. But I think the growing pains were worth it. When the first phase was done and they were ready to open it up, they had a ribbon cutting event.
Focus at that time was, really kind of, so the big things that were always addressed at any of these meetings that occurred over the entire anything, even when we were just having coffee or when we went and had formal meetings, and all the way to the formation of the bid and live it up. It was always the same things. It was always parking, and it was cleanliness, and it was safety. So So those are the things that were covered. And so, underneath each one of those umbrellas, there's broad topics, so, I mean, everything from like lighting. So we started, not from the very beginning, but, they did the broken window, that was in New York and it may have been around that same time when Giuliani was there. And he's basically like, look, when you have a broken window, then it just leads to more broken windows. It leads to more lights being out. It leads to more crime. Eventually, like, he extrapolated that one broken window would cause crime essentially, over the process kind of thing. So we immediately we started going to people and talking to them about making sure that literally replacing light bulbs, just cleaning things up, type thing, just attempting to, and really Jeff's activities from the very, very beginning were much more organizational as opposed to picking up trash, it was way more like trying to get more businesses involved, trying to get more people excited, trying to get more people, on the bus, come with us. And we're telling you that over time, this is going to be improved, and we're going to make improvements to this street. And it's not going to be a fast process, but it's going to be a process, and you need to be involved in that process. So that was kind of what he started with. And I remember him hiring. He's like, he came to us and said, look, I think that having sort of a street ambassador who would go around and pick up trash and basically just talk to people, and also go to some of the homeless people that we have here and let's try to get them some help, or let's try to, direct them towards services that are available to them, and kind of help them, but inadvertently sort of let's try to get them off the street kind of thing, type deal. So, that was kind of the early focus.
The Clean and Safe program was one, because that is with most of these downtown management organizations, their primary responsibility is, the area is pretty seedy. It was dirty. People throw a lot of trash around. And so the first thing that we had to do was launch a Clean and Safe program and make sure that it was visible, that people were wearing logos, and so people knew who was actually doing all this cleaning up. And, so that was a big priority. The other priority was retail marketing. There needed to be one place where if somebody was interested in opening a business on Hillsborough Street, that they could come and find out about the market, find out about available properties for lease, find out about the expectations and projections for student enrollment and all and stuff like that. And so that was a big priority for Jeff, was setting that up and figuring out how he would be on the grapevine for all of this real estate stuff that was happening in the area. So those were really two primary things, but there's a subtext in all of this, in that one of the reasons why we picked Jeff for this role was that he had political experience. He worked for state government in Pennsylvania, and he understood the importance of making sure everybody was heard and listening to people rather than having his own agenda, and making sure that he saw potential tripwires coming up for any initiative that the Hillsborough Street Community Services Corporation might undertake. He also understood when not to go somewhere, right? It would have been a good thing to do, but you don't go there because it's a third rail for some. Usually it's the neighborhood here. The neighborhood is very active and very concerned about encroachment into single-family areas, and any potential threat, they will mobilize the forces and bring people to bear right away. And so Jeff was always really sensitive to that, and always a really good listener, and made sure to reach out to people. And so that's one of the reasons we hired him, was because we knew that in setting up this organization, you had to establish its credibility right off the bat. If it was seen as an advocate for the business people only, or if it was seen as a lapdog of the university, or if it was seen as a kowtowing to the neighborhood's interests only, it would not have been successful. He had to really dance that fine line between all of these important interests and do that skillfully so that none of them felt like he was their enemy. Things that that Jeff did was pack a palooza. Yeah, I think just changing how people think of the street, and how to introduce new students to coming down here. They've got just about. There's a lot of challenges for the organization to rope people into having some affinity to Hillsborough Street, to make it feel like it's part of the college experience. And Packapalooza was really important to get people in their freshman year started, thinking of Hillsborough Street as their place. It's helped Hillsborough Street knit itself a little more into the broader community around Raleigh. That people come here who are not just affiliated with the university. They come here for that because there's such great music and there's a lot of cool stuff going on. Yeah, I think that's one. And there are a lot of good success stories here, but that's probably one that I think is one of the best.
The Aloft Hotel proposal came out, and they said they were going to put their lobby on the second floor with their bar, and they were going to have Gonza's. This was only Gonza's second location from where they had started. That really signaled that Hillsborough Street was open for investment. And then in pretty quick order, Valentine Commons, Stanhope, stuff on the west edge of campus started going on. Of course, the city did phase 2 of the street. Then at the other end, I think we got mostly a redeveloped street, a much more vibrant commercial district. The university and the state did not have to use eminent domain to acquire anything. The one thing we did acquire was developed privately, not by the university, so we created opportunity for other investors and other businesses. Plenty of student housing, plenty of retail, and huge investment by the city.
Hillsborough Street is a pretty important part of our history, and being respectful of that, and really recognizing that the changes that we make and the care that we give to it is not just about our little community. It is about enhancing and preserving a part of Raleigh's history, which is part of North Carolina's history. This collaborative experience of keeping the university plugged in, keeping the neighborhood plugged in, keeping the businesses, so that, because what had happened in the past was there was this frayed fabric. Here we are smacked all together, and it just wasn't knit together, at all. It was, the university was doing its thing, businesses were doing their thing, the city was doing its thing, the neighborhoods were complaining, nobody was happy. But the development of the organization that is permanent, it's not like that's not going to go away. And the fact that it's a permanent entity with a mission to keep all of this going, I think that's been huge.